Hello everyone, my name is Mr. Omega and welcome to the Retro Zone. In this episode of the Retro Zone we'll be taking a look at Desert Strike: Return to the Gulf, developed and published by Electronic Arts in 1992. Desert Strike is part of the Strike series, which includes 4 other games, all with the word Strike in the title. Desert Strike was originally released for the Sega Genesis and later ported to the SNES, Game Gear, Game Boy, PC, Macintosh, Amiga, Atari Lynx, Game Boy Advance and the PSP. Desert Strike portrays the player as a helicopter pilot during the fictional war in the Gulf, where the US sends just a lone Apache helicopter in a series of swift tactical missions to save the world from the evil dictator Kubaba. And again, it's another game where you have to save the world. The game started development when an ex-EA employee met the current president, who at the time was Trip Hawkins. Hawkins suggested creating a game for the soon-to-be-released Sega Genesis, and he also suggested making a game similar to Choplifter, which was released for the Apple II. Rather than creating a rigid path for the player to go through on each mission, Desert Strike incorporates a sandbox approach where the player can choose which order to complete the missions. If the player is unable to complete the mission for whatever reason, and that's very possible, the game will instruct the player to return to base and to restart the mission. The sprites of the vehicles are actually 3D models and then shrank the models to the required size, and bearing in mind the Sega Genesis could only output to a size of 320 by 240. The physics of the game are not completely accurate either. The game developers chose to make the physics of the players would perceive. They didn't want them to be super realistic, and they didn't want them to be toyish either. So they went for the middle ground, and they chose to do that so they didn't alienate the player. Now, I could go on to say everything that is great about this game and what it excels at, such as making power-ups make sense, but we all know that they far outweigh the negatives. With this in mind, I'm only going to touch on the major drawback to this game. That major drawback is aiming. You would think for a game that's all about shooting, there would be some kind of aiming involved. And while yes, the game auto-aims for you, and that's all well and good, but there have been countless times where I personally have tried to shoot a missile at an enemy vehicle, and the game chose to aim at the little man holding a machine gun. I mean, I'm all for, shooting the missiles at the people, but when you're being attacked by a helicopter, you want to be taking out the helicopter first. And yes, even then it can still miss. You heard that right. Now, overall the aiming isn't terrible, it's just frustrating to say the least. I mean, you can be in a fight with a load of enemies which can be near each other, and you want to be taking out a particular target. The game might, however, choose to take out a different target. Now, some people thought Desert Strike was in bad taste, an attempt to capitalise on the recent Gulf War. And this belief does hold some merit. The game was originally going to be based on the Lebanese Civil War, but sometime during development, it was changed. Desert Strike was a very successful game. Its sales eclipsed those of other EA games at the time. Most reviewers gave it over 90%, and it spawned a franchise. The game itself is probably one of the most ported games in video game history, with the PSP being the latest port made 14 years after the original release. Desert Strike is definitely one of the most must-have games to have been played for the older systems such as the Sega Genesis and the SNES. As always, thanks for joining me in the past, and now it's time to take you back to the present. If you'd like to see more from myself or the Generation Gamers game, click on the logos on the screen, or alternatively go to our official website. Mr. Omega can be found at omegasmash.net, and the Generation Gamers game can be found at generationgamersgame.com.